Welcome back to Movie Guys Improvise. You are listening to
Chill with Realms.
Jurassic Mark.
and Faerhad Targaryen. Last week we talked about an anime movie from back in the last decade, Digimon the movie. Definitely worth watching if you're an anime fan or a Digimon fan. You definitely should check it out. If you haven't already, go ahead and check out that episode of ours as well. For today's episode, we wanted to talk about a air quote black comedy from 2016, directed by the Coen brothers, Joel Coen and Ethan Coen. Hail Caesar. So this was a very interesting choice, Jurassic Mark. Definitely very,
Thank you.
but it's a tricky one for me to discuss and talk about before I even start with my thoughts. Since this was your choice, why don't you tell us a little bit about the movie and why you chose this as today's episode?
Okay, quick synopsis. The long and short of it is, this is the story of Eddie Mannix, played by Josh Brolin. He is what is considered a Hollywood fixer at a fictional studio called Capitol Pictures in the 1950s. To give you a little bit of background, back in those days, actors didn't really work as, to borrow an analogy from sports, free agents. If you were an actor in Hollywood, you worked for a specific studio, like Paramount or RKO or something like that. And so the studio decided what movies that you would star in and like what trajectory your career would take and whatnot. And Mannix works for a fictional studio, again, called Capitol Pictures. And as a fixer, part of his job means he has to constantly keep his stars at the studio out of trouble, whether that's breaking up a party that one of them has attended irresponsibly, or making sure that one of them who is, pregnant out of wedlock is found a suitable husband, because this is the 50s and those were the norms back then, and so on and so forth. So this movie unfolds over the course of I think really just 2 days in his life, but it shows you just how hectic and out of control everything seems to be. And yet, despite it all, he really does seem to love this work, even if it drives him crazy. So that's the Spark Notes version, I would say.
Yeah, so you're definitely right about how back then, at least, according to Wikipedia, this movie takes place in 1951 Hollywood, and it definitely seemed very arranged with which actors get to act in which roles. They conveyed that with the character Hobie Doyle, played by Alden Ehrenreich. I am sorry if I'm not saying that name right, but they showed how he's a action cowboy star sort of actor, but he's not. He doesn't really act in roles that's more like drama based. That's required a lot of dialogue, and there's a scene where he kind of struggles at first. So yeah, they definitely show how it was very arranged in that manner, but he appreciated it. He showed how he wanted to actually try to be better. It's not like he was being impatient in the role that he was given. So I have to say, as I was saying earlier, this movie choice for me to watch, it's a tricky one for me to even talk about because I don't fully get what the movie was about. I guess I understand the plot, which is George Clooney, aka Baird Whitlock, who's a really, I guess, triple A Hollywood actor, gets kidnapped by communists and held at ransom. That's, I guess, basically the gist of the plot, or at least how the movie begins, but that doesn't really seem to be only what the movie is about. The movie is not about, kidnapping and ransom. That's just how things are set up, if that makes any sense. So I didn't really get what the movie is about, which is not a fault against the movie. I mean, maybe I don't understand these directors' acting style, because...
Quick question. How many times did you watch it?
Just the one time.
Okay, because for me, the first time I watched through, I felt the same way, and I still feel the same way. But at the same time, when I doubled back and I watched it again, now knowing where the movie was leading, it was a little bit easier to watch.
Got it. Okay. All right. Good. That's very good to hear, actually. And yeah, watching a movie more than once, always. It always enhances your perspective on things. So I want to definitely hear your thoughts about that, Realms. Well, just about the movie in general. Um, we are going to delve into spoiler territory eventually. And one thing I want to bring up, I guess, it's probably a weird thing to bring up in the beginning of this episode, but the ending. I want to talk about the ending first because the movie just kind of ends abruptly, and I don't understand why. Now, I did watch a review of the movie and learned that it's apparently something that the Coen brothers, the directors, just do with their movie endings, but that still doesn't explain why. Like, okay, it's a Coen brothers thing, but why do they do it? Why do they end their movies in that way? Why did this movie end abruptly in that way? I don't get it, you know?
Well, I think... sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you probably watched the same review that I watched, because I found out that same thing.
I think with this movie, they weren't trying to do a traditional 3-act plot, like a lot of films do. They were more interested in sort of giving us a character study, if I had to hazard a guess. Like this, the movie, when you get right down to it, it's about Eddie Mannix, Josh Brolin's character, and the story kind of exists just as a lens that we can look at his career through. Like it just sort of invites us to see what life was like for these guys, and the plot is just really a collection of subplots that all happen to take place at the same time, all involving him somehow.
But that made the movie interesting. Like, I will admit it was difficult for me to follow along, but I liked how it was like a bunch of subplots all connected to this fixer who is Mannix, played by Josh Brolin. Yeah, again, I don't get what some of these subplots mean. I feel like there is meaning to them. I just didn't understand what it means because the movie begins with him making his confessions, I guess, to a priest, right? His primary sinning seems to be about cigarettes. Like he's promised his wife that he was quitting cigarettes, but he snuck a cigarette or two. The whole smoking subplot in general, I don't get what it was for unless it was just filler, which I don't think it was. I think it was supposed to mean something, or it was a symbolic metaphor of sorts, which I didn't get. Do either of you gentlemen know what the whole cigarette thing, if it was supposed to mean something?
I think it was just meant to show that this guy's stressed out constantly. He's babysitting all these actors with huge egos. The man wants a cigarette once in a while to calm down, but even though he's promised his wife that he's going to try to quit smoking.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it meant too much, because by the end of the movie, he's they do that same scene again, and he's still having the issue, not too much improvement.
Yeah.
Okay, so that would mean that the whole thing with cigarettes is just humanizing him. He's still just a man, and he's undergoing all this stress of this responsibility of being the fixer at Capitol Films. I think that's what the fictional movie studio is called, right?
Capitol Pictures, yeah.
Capitol Pictures, sorry. But it seems that he, despite how stressed out he is, he really enjoys his job, or at least what he does, because he's offered a job from this place called Lockheed Corporation, which actually is a real company. That's what I found out. But he turns down their offer, ultimately. And I wasn't entirely sure what that was supposed to mean, because better pay is implied. I don't know if they actually stated it, but better hours was definitely mentioned by him or his wife. But he never really, considers it that much. He's too deep into his job at Capitol Pictures that he eventually just turns down Lockheed Corporation. He tells his secretary to tell them thanks, but no thanks. And that's it. That's the end of it right there. Yeah, so I wasn't sure. Well, I guess it's kind of just showing the day in the life of what an actual fixer would be. That's what it was supposed to be. Because again, like you said, it's a bunch of different little subplots. And one of the subplots is this guy who is in this seat has the responsibility of deciding whether or not it's best for him to stay where he is or to move on to something else. So,
I mean, in his position, if I was him, I guess the cigarettes, like, they do shed light on how stressful the job is, but if I was him, I wouldn't want to trade that job up either. Did you see how many people he was slapping up? He slapped up Mary Jo, George Clooney's character.
Oh my God, he got to roughhouse like the biggest celebrities in the world in this job. Yeah,
That's too much fun.
oh yeah.
yeah, let's talk about that. The movie starts off like that. That wasn't entirely like clear for me either. Like, he pulls up to a house, which I guess is his house, and it's his wife in a photo shoot, right? That's his wife?
No, that was an actress.
Oh, that was an actress. Okay, my bad. So he just went to collect the actress because she was doing a photo shoot she wasn't authorized to do or something, and he slaps sense into her after that. So we get the picture then, right in the beginning, that Maxwell can be rough if he needs to be. So then later, after George Clooney is brought back to Eddie's office, he starts rambling about everything he learned from the communists, right? Talking about like, oh, they have it all figured out. See, this is all a ploy. This being in Hollywood, it's all just a ploy or something. I don't remember every single line that he made, but it sounded like he was quite brainwashed, right? But then Eddie tries to slap sense into him just like that. I thought right after that, like, I was reminded of the beginning of the movie, but I didn't think George Clooney, aka Baird Whitlock, I didn't think he was going to just take that. I was going to be like, hey, stop slapping me, asshole, and just, push him back or something. But he just kind of takes it. So that was a little bit, off for me. Were they just trying to show that Baird Whitlock is just dim-witted or something? Easily swayed, easily convinced?
I think so. I mean, look, for me, clueless communist George Clooney is pretty damn funny, and like one of the highlights of this movie, like him just saying things like, hey, did you know that this whole studio is just a tool of the state? I know, right? Like, so I think that was meant to show that he'll swallow anything, pretty much.
Pause.
Wow.
But yo, I feel like Eddie's character, or not Eddie's character, Eddie, the character, that's probably like his superpower. Once he slaps people up, they start acting right.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, because right after that, he goes on to finish Hail Caesar. And I wasn't sure, but were they trying to say, or were they trying to portray that he wasn't going off script, or he was staying on script? Because he says, he fumbles right at the end, right? The final line was supposed to be, or the final word was supposed to be faith, but they changed it or something like that. Was that just because he was offset for 2 days and he missed that it was changed? Or was it because he was still overcoming like the brainwashing that the communists did to him?
I don't know if that was necessarily meant as commentary. I think it was just a joke. He screwed up the line at the last minute. But it did demonstrate how like expensive some of these takes would get back then, because there weren't really computer effects. There was no such thing as digital film. So if you screwed up a big expensive take, it could set the whole production back. So I think that was like what it was riffing on. You heard like 50 people just groan when it became obvious that he didn't know what the line was. I think anyway.
No, that makes sense. Actually, I didn't think about that before, but yeah. Post-processing in modern times is a lot easier. Back then, they didn't have like the editing tools that we have now. So yeah, if they messed up once, it will probably be pretty expensive to try to recreate it again.
Yeah, like I don't know if you guys heard about this, but even in like the early aughts when they filmed the first Lord of the Rings movie, there's a shot of like a Jeep driving past the hobbits at one point. And nobody caught it until it was already released in theaters. So they had to go back and like digitally remove that before it like came out on DVD. But yeah, you couldn't do that in 1951.
Damn.
I didn't know about that actually. The
Jeep.
Jeep.
Look it up. I think like the original version's on YouTube. Like you can see the truck going by and everything.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to check that out afterward. So on the topic of the communists, the two, I guess, extras who kind of they drug George Clooney basically, and then they kidnap him. One of the extras was played by Wayne Knight. I thought that was him, but I wasn't entirely sure.
Yep.
Immediately recognized him. I was like, oh shoot, I've never seen him in any other movie aside from the one you're about to mention.
Jurassic Park?
Oh wait, hold up. I didn't see him in that. I didn't watch Jurassic Park. Actually, I don't think I watched the original one. Is that what the one?
Oh, it's the best one. Oh man.
That's one of the movies I gotta go back and watch.
Okay.
I saw him in Space Jam.
Oh,
yeah. Oh, I forgot he was in that.
yeah.
Fixing a divot.
No, yeah, man, Space Jam takes me back. Yeah, especially the rumors I've been hearing now about a new Space Jam with LeBron and stuff, and all like a whole bunch of Warner Brothers characters instead of just Looney Tunes.
Oh boy.
Hey, I mean, LeBron's not a bad actor. Did you guys see Trainwreck?
Nah.
I did not.
He was in that movie, and LeBron was actually pretty funny in that movie. But anyway, I digress. So, extras.
Right, yeah. Wayne Knight played one of the extras that was like nervously trying to drug Baird Whitlock. Successfully does, but he was like super nervous at the time. And then like drives him over to the communists. So then the communists try to brainwash him, and Baird Whitlock at first doesn't seem to be overly concerned about the fact that he just woke up in some random house, right? He just kind of acts like this was something that's normal. Maybe because he supposedly has this history of, being a partier and stuff, and maybe he thought he was just partying and ended up there. But he knew eventually that he was kidnapped and held at ransom. But the communist characters were semi-developed. They're introduced by name, and they each give their pieces about, economics and stuff. But their story ends with them just getting arrested, right? Because Hobie Doyle, he spots the briefcase with the money that they were demanding for ransom, then follows the car, and then finds Baird Whitlock, and then rescues him. And then the police come and arrest the communists. So what exactly was that about? I feel like there's a better explanation for it that I just can't seem to grasp. So what was the entire subplot of the communists, which is probably one of the biggest subplots of the movie? What exactly was that supposed to be about? Like, what is the message they're sending us about that plot?
Well, I think with that one, it was partly to ground the movie in its period, because, in the 50s, there was the Communist Red Scare, and a lot of people in the movie industry were blacklisted because they were accused of being communists. So it was like partly to help set the movie in its era. Like if you make a movie in the 90s, people have to rock like Zubaz pants and go to Blockbuster. If you make a movie in the 50s, everybody has to be scared of communists. So I think that was part of it. And it was, I'm sure it was also meant as like a gimmick to get George Clooney's character in a lot of trouble so that somebody else would have to go out and save his butt. Gotcha. So I don't know if there was necessarily a political message intended there per se, but you never know.
Okay, yeah. What you said also makes sense to me, because this does take place in 1951, so...
Right.
They also had the twist, I guess kind of a minor twist, or a major twist, that Channing Tatum's character, which I have to say I was pleasantly surprised to see that he was in this movie as Bert Gurney, who was the leader of the communists. And Scarlett Johansson too, yeah.
Yeah.
So when Eddie is on the phone with the communists, they say to drop off the ransom money at stage 8, which is the same stage in behind where Channing Tatum's character is recording that scene, that musical scene, which I will say, I really enjoyed all of the musical scenes of this movie, at least the tunes and how they're all set up and presented, including Scarlett Johansson's one with the mermaids, the cinematography, how that scene started. I thought that was really cool, and I enjoyed the singing and stuff.
That was my favorite part.
Scarlett was a mermaid.
Yes, sir.
So for Bert Gurney's character, there was a lot of dancing. The song was just about, no dames, like we're all sailors, we'll be out at sea, we'll be seeing a lot of each other and stuff. And then as the song progresses toward the end, there are a bunch of other sailors who open the door and say this bar looks open, and they join in the dancing and the singing. And then it got kind of homoerotic, but I was wondering if that was supposed to mean anything.
I think that was the joke. Like, these guys are all singing about, how much they're going to miss women, but they're dancing, shall we say, flamboyantly. So I think that was the joke.
Okay. The bartender even says it's not that kind of place, right? So
yeah.
But was it supposed to mean anything that this same person, Bert Gurney, is also secretly the leader of the communists that kidnapped Baird Whitlock?
He was probably thrown in as a twist villain, and plus you got that gag where he, jumps onto the submarine and, kicks his leg up like a ballet dancer, which is pretty funny.
True. So, on the topic of Alden Ehrenreich's character, Hobie Doyle, the cowboy star who ends up having to go into a drama, he goes on a dinner date for the opening night, one of his movies, with an actress called Carlotta Valdez, played by Veronica Osorio. And in the movie, it's shown that Eddie, as the fixer, just had them two go out together just as a publicity, right? But they end up seeming to really enjoy each other's company. Genuinely, they, had fun hanging out together. Especially in the dinner scene, where he's taking that piece of spaghetti and, turning it into a lasso. I think that was supposed to be, a inside joke about, spaghetti westerns, right?
Yeah.
And they were singing together and stuff, so that was cool. I just didn't get, again, with the whole subplots, how, if it was supposed to have a deeper meaning, or if it was just showing that this is how showbiz goes. And in their case, not only did they get along, but they actually really liked each other,
Yeah.
Would that it were that simple.
Oh my god.
Wow.
And then they change it it's complicated.
I don't think he was ever going to get that line right.
No way.
Oh man. The whole thing with the twin journalists, that was a little bit confusing at first, because the first of the twins, Thora, mentions that she has a sister and even says, "Don't confuse me with my sister," which is ironically exactly what I did when her sister showed up in the same actress, obviously in a different outfit. It was the same day. I had to rewind it because I'm like, wait a minute, what am I missing here? And I'm like, oh, okay, they're just twins. That's yeah, that's what that was.
I didn't catch that then. I completely missed that one.
So
yeah, they double cast Tilda Swinton.
Wow, that went over my head.
So now, since we're moving toward the end of closing comments, before we even get there, Realms, I wanted to ask you, since you mentioned in the beginning that you had watched this movie twice, I'm really intrigued to figure out, on your second watch through, what sort of things did you pick up on that you didn't get initially?
It wasn't really anything specific that I picked up on, but just knowing the direction of the movie helped, because in my first watch, I didn't know what kind of movie I was even jumping into, number one.
Same, yeah.
And then they start off as Romans, they're walking through, and then next thing you know, the detective is sitting there watching it on screen. So it kind of jumped from, okay, we're in this era, but then no, now we're watching this era. And it was okay, we're in Hollywood.
Right. Okay. Watching the movie for the second time basically helped you to understand the structure of the movie. As JM put it, this isn't really a traditional Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, but watching it the second time showed you the fluidity of how the plot is structured. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, because at first I'm thinking, okay, we're watching a movie of them watching a movie. The whole time I'm having questions and not really actually able to enjoy the movie because I'm kind of confused what's going on at first.
I see. Yeah. For me, this movie was definitely enjoyable. I just feel because my mind wasn't as open enough, since I didn't really know what kind of movie this was supposed to be, I just didn't really fully understand it, and that's why it probably would be worth watching more than once. Because I think, being what the time frame is for this, taking place in 1951, I feel like this movie goes with some stereotypes in terms of Hollywood, but goes against it. One of the stereotypes, I guess it was, or maybe stereotype is not even the right word, but I guess impressions about how the character Hobie Doyle is known as an action star, yet he doesn't have the acting chops to be in a serious drama, right? So that's playing toward the impression. Scarlett Johansson's character, Deanna Moran, I think is her name. She has like a kid-friendly image, but she was impregnated, which Eddie wants to fix. So they were setting up this whole thing where Jonah Hill, also surprising to see him in this movie, as Joseph Silverman, a surety agent, was going to adopt the baby, and then she was going to adopt the child back. I think that's what it was going to be.
They were going to have her adopt her own baby to avoid the bad publicity of being pregnant as an unmarried woman. Like they were going to say, hey, let's just get her to give up the baby for a brief period, and then she'll adopt the baby back, and we'll get some good press out of it, and nobody has to know that it was born out of wedlock.
Right. That was the original plan, but she ends up being so attracted to Joseph Silverman because he's so good at what he does, because he's so confident in his abilities with such a calm demeanor, that they end up just getting married, you know?
Yeah.
Which is genuine love, you know? That wasn't something that Eddie was expecting. That just ended up happening. Same with...
Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, same with Carletta and Hobie Doyle, how they genuinely enjoyed each other's company when it was just supposed to be publicity, you know?
Yeah, it seemed to work out. Maybe they were saying something about some sort of merit to the insane structure. I don't know. But what I was going to say is ScarJo can do comedy. Like, you know, I know we mostly know her as like an action star nowadays because of the Avengers movies, but she can be really funny. Like, you give her the right script, she could be hilarious.
I mean, I think she's funny sometimes in the Avengers movies, so yeah, she can definitely carry her own comedy. I could see that.
With the accent, though.
Oh my god, that was great.
That's not how I was expecting she was going to sound in this movie.
Hey, where's my fish ass?
Oh, man. So, one last thing about the communist that I wanted to mention. Dolph Lundgren, I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but he's the guy who appears out of that submarine right before they drop the cash, which, you know, there goes the cash. I guess that was a cameo. I don't know if it was supposed to mean something that they chose him for the role. And I will say, I did really like how Eddie decided to just confide in Hobie about what was going on, right? He just sat, had a serious look on his face, and said to Hobie, listen, Baird Whitlock was kidnapped. This right here is ransom money. This is what's going on. And it turns out Hobie was very trustworthy because he says, you should take a look at the extras because you never know what they're thinking. And he's the one who goes and rescues Baird Whitlock himself, right?
Yeah.
And I am just finding this out now. Michael Gambon, a.k.a. the worst Dumbledore, was the narrator of the entire movie.
Oh.
Harry, did you put your hand in the goblet of fire?
You know, that's funny because there was a scene in the beginning of the movie where he's walking with the cane. I think he had a cane, and I thought of Dumbledore.
Ah, I wonder if that was him as a cameo. I don't know. I'd have to go back and look. But yeah, those are pretty much my overall thoughts of the movie. Going into closing statements, if you gentlemen have any other closing statements you want to make before we go into ratings.
It was a little bit tough on the first watch, a little bit easy on the second watch. Mm-hmm. I did enjoy the cameos, you know, Channing Tatum, Scarlett Johansson, Jonah, Wayne Knight, and then there was another one of the communists, Isaac Heller. I recognize him. He was the writer in Once Upon a Time, and he also played a small part in Scandal. So I enjoyed little things like that. It was nice to see the insights that they had on religion. What else? I think that was about it.
No, yeah. So I'm glad that you mentioned that because I completely forgot about it. And I think that was one of my favorite scenes in the movie when Eddie meets with a group of 4, right? Yes. I think one of them is a priest, another one is a reverend, another one is a rabbi. I don't remember who each of the characters were, but 3 of them were of the Christian faith.
I think the other one was supposed to be like an Orthodox Christian minister. I don't know what the correct term is, but I think that's what he was supposed to be.
Right. And I think that was one of my favorite scenes in the movie. And he was just trying to, I guess, make sure that this movie that was going to have Jesus Christ in it was not going to offend anyone. But the scene didn't end conclusively. Not that it had to, but I thought that scene was really good, like included in the movie.
Oh, that was hilarious. Like, especially the rabbi in that scene. He's like, yeah, God is a bachelor and very angry. That was awesome.
JM, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Any other closing statements from you, sir?
I guess I would just say that I like the fact that the Coen brothers, keep making these unconventional comedies. You know, like they did The Big Lebowski, they did this movie Lady Killers, which I really liked, and they make a lot of comedies that are really memorable, but also like very different from each other. Like Fargo's another good one. And I kind of respect them for not just doing the same thing over and over again with their movies. And B, I definitely agree that this movie's probably easier to follow the second time around. It does jump around a little bit, and if you're not used to sort of slice of life storytelling, I'm sure it could get a little confusing at times. But with that said, I really liked it.
Got it. Which it was for me. Like, it was a little bit confusing because I just really couldn't figure out what it was about. But I guess it is one that becomes more clear or clearer as Realms was putting it, the structure of the movie, how it flows in the second watch.
One thing that was hurting it for me was when they started on like the narration and everything. It kind of gave me vibes like I don't know if you two have seen it, a series of unfortunate events on Netflix.
I've seen some of the episodes, yeah. And I remember there being a narrator there, yeah.
Yeah, for me, that series was a tough watch, so I started getting vibes like that, and that kind of ruined it for me.
I see. Tough in what way, if you don't mind me asking?
Just trying to figure out the best words to describe. Honestly, I don't even know how to describe what it was. It was just, I guess, a lot of. I don't have the words with me right now.
Got it.
Okay, I can't describe it right now.
That's fine. I mean, I've only seen a few episodes, but I can kind of understand what you mean. But I think it would only be further explained if you had more time to like gather your thoughts. So that's cool. Now, going into ratings, this movie was definitely enjoyable. I think I would watch it again. But for me to rate it, I want to try to be objective, like what this movie deserves, what it accomplished, combined with my actual enjoyment of it from the first time watching it. And putting those two together, I think the most fair rating that I can give it would be, right now, a 6.5 out of 10.
I would personally give it a 7. I like the characters in this movie. I like the performances in this movie. I will admit that the plot is kind of threadbare and the pacing drags sometimes. Like, I know it's an hour and 45 minutes, but it feels a little bit longer. But with that said, the cast is great. I think that's what sells this movie, and everybody's clearly having a lot of fun playing their roles. So that's what beefs it up to a 7 for me personally.
Very good.
After my first watch, I personally wanted to say a 4, but after rewatching, I can give it a 6. And I feel like it's something, the more you see it, the better it gets for you, especially if it has things within it that interest you to hear more about. I want to stay with a 6, from my personal taste, at least.
I was going to say 4 to 6 is a big jump, so watching it a second time, that really kind of switched things up for you in terms of perspective, huh?
Yeah, it gave it a little bit more clarity for me.
Cool. Okay, so yeah, I think I should probably watch it again sometime. So definitely a great choice, JM, so thank you for that.
Oh, you're most welcome. And on that score, do you have something to recommend to the pair of us?
I do. So next week is going to be episode 20 and also the season finale of season 2 of the MGI podcast. And I want to cap this off with one of my favorite sci-fi movies, The Day After Tomorrow.
Oh,
all right. Little Roland Emmerich action there.
Exactly.
Damn, you gotta hit me with that one.
Have you gentlemen seen that one before?
It's been years, but yeah.
Okay.
For me, when it first came out, I really, really wanted to see it. And then when I got my chance to see it, it started out really slow for me, and I gave up on it. But I would love to commit and actually get through the whole thing.
Perfect. Well, now you have that opportunity. Awesome.
Yes, sir.
Well, that just about does it for this episode of Movie Guys Improvise. You have been listening to
Chill with Realms,
Jurassic Mark,
and Faerhad Targaryen. Thank you all so much for listening to us, and catch us next week on our season finale.
Have a blessed one, y'all. Chill energy only.
Take care, y'all.